The rain fell hard over the city, streaking down the tall buildings like silver rivers. Streets shone under neon lights, reflecting the hurried steps of people running to stay dry. Among them was Mark Reynolds, a tired single father, carrying an umbrella that had seen better days. His son, Eli, ran ahead, splashing through puddles, his laughter echoing in the wet alleyways. Mark smiled at his son, even though his chest tightened at the thought of bills waiting unpaid at home. Money had never been easy, and after his wife passed away 2 years ago, everything had become harder. Work at the delivery warehouse barely paid enough to cover rent, food, and electricity. But Mark never let Eli see the worry in his eyes. To him, being a father meant keeping hope alive, no matter how small. As Mark and Eli turned a corner, Mark noticed movement near a dark alley. At first, he thought it was a stray animal. But as he drew closer, he saw a small figure crouched against the wall. Her clothes were soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. The girl looked no older than 12 or 13. She shivered violently, hugging her knees as if the world itself were too heavy for her to bear. Mark's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. Lowering his umbrella over her, the girl flinched and looked up. Her eyes were sharp and cautious, almost too mature for someone her age. She didn't answer at first, only staring at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Eli, noticing the girl, ran up beside his father. "Daddy, she's cold," Eli said, pointing at her tattered jacket. "Can she come with us?" Mark hesitated. He had no extra money, no space, and very little food. But as he looked at the girl's pale face and trembling frame, he felt a pang in his heart. "All right," he said quietly. "Come on. We'll get you out of this rain." He extended his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, the girl took it. Her grip was surprisingly firm. By the time they reached their apartment building, the rain had soaked Mark through, and Eli was dripping water onto the floor. The girl, who had followed silently, still hadn't spoken. Mark guided them to their small unit on the 5th floor. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen so tiny that cooking felt like a challenge, and a living room that doubled as Eli's play area, but it was safe and dry. "Here we are," Mark said, closing the door behind them. He looked at the girl, noticing her wet shoes and ragged appearance. "You can stay here tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." The girl nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and cautious. Eli ran off to grab a towel for her. "Here, you can dry off. My dad's a good guy, see?" The girl smiled faintly at Eli. It was the first sign of warmth she had shown. Mark, watching them, felt a strange sense of relief and worry all at once. How had she ended up alone in the city? Where were her parents? After Eli finished helping her, Mark gave her a dry blanket and a spare set of clothes he kept for emergencies. "You can sleep in Eli's room tonight," he said. "There's room on the floor. And you'll be warm." The girl, now somewhat more comfortable, finally introduced herself. "I'm Lyra," she said softly. "Lyra," Mark repeated, testing the name on his tongue. Eli waved energetically. "Hi, Lyra. You can sleep on my blanket. It's super soft." Lyra smiled, a hint of genuine gratitude in her eyes. It was a small gesture, but it made Mark's chest tighten. He had no idea how much her presence would change their lives. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He sat in the living room, sipping lukewarm tea, listening to Eli's gentle breathing from the bedroom. Outside, the rain continued, drumming against the windows. Mark thought about his own past, about the struggles he faced alone, and now about this mysterious girl who had suddenly appeared in their lives. Something about her felt different, not just because of her intelligence and calmness under stress, but because of a certain confidence she carried despite her young age. It was subtle how she examined the small gadgets in their apartment, how she seemed to notice details others might miss. The next morning, Lyra woke early. She helped Eli with breakfast, carefully pouring cereal and milk into bowls, moving with surprising precision. Mark watched, impressed. "You're very good at this," he said cautiously. Lyra shrugged. "I've had to learn things on my own," she said, avoiding his eyes. Mark nodded, sensing that there was more to her story. But he didn't press. For now, he just wanted her to feel safe. After breakfast, Mark took Eli and Lyra to the nearby park. Eli ran off to play, as kids usually do. But Lyra stayed close to Mark's side. She watched everything, quietly observing the city's movement, the people, the drones flying overhead, and the cars zipping past. She noticed patterns, predicted which streetlights would change, and even pointed out a hidden shortcut through a narrow alley. Mark was stunned. "How do you know all that?" he asked. Lyra hesitated. "I pay attention," she said finally, as if it were the simplest explanation in the world. Mark laughed softly. "Well, I guess that's one way to stay alive in the city." Eli tugged at Lyra's hand. "Come on. Let's see who can swing the highest." For the first time, Lyra laughed. It was brief, but Mark noticed the sound lingered in the air, soft and genuine. As the day went on, Mark realized something important. Taking her in wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a test of humanity. He had very little, yet he had given what he could: warmth, food, and safety. And in return, Lyra gave them something priceless too. Her presence, her sharp mind, and her growing trust. That evening, Mark returned home with groceries he had bought on a tight budget. Lyra followed him into the apartment, carrying a small bag she had found abandoned on the street. Inside were a few old tools and gadgets she had salvaged. "I fixed some of these," Lyra said quietly, showing him the small devices she had repaired. Mark examined them, amazed. Each piece worked perfectly. "You're incredible," he said honestly. "I've never seen a kid your age do this." Lyra just shrugged again, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I've had to learn." Mark looked at her thoughtfully. He realized that the city had made her strong, smart, and self-reliant, perhaps in ways no ordinary child could be, and he couldn't help but feel a deep respect for her resilience. That night, as he tucked Eli into bed, Mark whispered a quiet promise to himself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would protect Lyra as he did his own son. She had nowhere else to go, and he had enough heart to give her a safe place. Outside, the rain began to ease, leaving the city glistening under the early morning light. And in their small apartment, Mark, Eli, and Lyra sat together. A small family formed not by blood, but by kindness, courage, and a shared will to survive in a world that often seemed too big and too harsh. Mark didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter would change everything. Lyra wasn't just a wandering girl, she was a spark of brilliance, a puzzle wrapped in mystery, and the beginning of a story that would test his ingenuity, courage, and the very definition of family. And in that quiet moment, with the city waking around them, Mark made an unspoken vow. No matter how hard life became, he would never turn away someone in need. Not ever. The next morning, the sun peeked through gray clouds, casting a soft light over the city. Birds chirped in the distance, though the city's constant hum of drones, cars, and chatter never truly stopped. Mark woke early, as usual, while Eli was still fast asleep. He sipped his tea quietly, thinking about Lyra. She had been with them for a day now. Yet the girl's presence already changed the apartment. Eli was cheerful, laughing more than usual. Mark felt a small spark of hope that maybe, for the first time in a long while, they could feel like a real family. Lyra woke shortly after, moving silently in the kitchen. She had already learned how to use the small appliances and began helping herself to breakfast. Mark watched her from the doorway. There was something different about her, an air of confidence unusual for a child her age. She handled the toaster and kettle with a precision that seemed almost natural. "Good morning," Mark said, trying to sound casual. "Morning," Lyra replied softly, her eyes on the bread she was carefully buttering. Eli appeared, rubbing his eyes. Morning. Breakfast smells good. He glanced at Lyra. You're really good at this. Lyra smiled faintly. I like to help. After breakfast, Mark suggested they take a walk in the nearby park. Eli ran ahead as usual, while Lyra and Mark followed slowly. You've been quiet about yourself, Mark said carefully. Do you want to tell me anything about your family? Lyra hesitated. She glanced at him, considering how much to reveal. I don't have anyone right now, she said finally. I was on my own for a while. Mark felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask more, to know how a child could survive alone in the city. But he also knew it might frighten her. All right, he said gently. Well, you have us now. You're safe here. Lyra's eyes softened, and she nodded. Thank you. The day passed slowly but pleasantly. Eli played on the swings and slides, laughing as Lyra pushed him higher each time. Mark noticed how quickly the girl learned new things. She studied the patterns of children on the playground, predicting where they would run and how they would move. She even noticed which slides and swings were slightly loose and avoided them. Later, as they walked back home, Mark noticed her eyes scanning the streets. She was watching not just the people but the machines, drones hovering overhead, delivery bots rolling along sidewalks, even traffic lights changing in patterns. You notice a lot, Mark said with a small smile. Lyra shrugged. It helps. You notice patterns, you stay safe. Mark was impressed. Most adults didn't pay attention to such details. Yet here was a child reading the city like a book. It made him curious and cautious. Something about Lyra was more than ordinary. Back in their apartment, Lyra started fiddling with a broken old radio. Mark watched, fascinated, as she carefully opened the device, examined the circuits, and replaced a few wires with small tools she pulled from her bag. Within minutes, the radio worked again, picking up distant stations clearly. You fixed it? Mark asked in disbelief. Lyra nodded, her face serious. I know how. Mark couldn't hide his admiration. You're incredible, Lyra. I don't think I've ever seen a kid your age do this. Lyra looked down, fidgeting with her fingers. I had to figure things out on my own. Mark felt a pang in his heart. The city had been hard on her. And yet, despite everything, she remained calm, capable, and kind. That evening, Mark returned home from work. His day had been exhausting, but seeing Lyra and Eli together gave him energy he didn't know he had. He found Lyra sitting at the small kitchen table, carefully studying one of the small robots Eli had gotten for his birthday last year. She was tinkering with it, adjusting a wheel and smoothing out a circuit. You're really good with machines, Mark said. Lyra didn't look up. It's fun. I like understanding how things work. Mark nodded, smiling. You know, most people give up too soon. But not you. That's impressive. Lyra's eyes met his for a brief moment. There was something in her gaze, a mix of caution and trust, that made Mark realize she was starting to see him as more than just a stranger who gave her shelter. Over the next few days, Lyra's presence in the apartment became normal. She helped Eli with schoolwork, taught him small tricks to make learning fun, and even assisted Mark in small ways around the apartment. Sometimes she would repair broken appliances, other times she would find ways to save electricity or water, showing a cleverness far beyond her age. Mark marveled at her ingenuity. It wasn't just the skills, it was her mind. Her ability to notice small things and solve problems quickly. She reminded him that human ingenuity could shine even in difficult circumstances. One afternoon, while Mark was at the warehouse for his shift, a small drone hovered near the apartment. Its camera focused on the window where Lyra and Eli were playing. Lyra noticed it immediately and gestured for Eli to stay inside. She whispered something to the drone, and after a few moments, it moved on. When Mark returned, he noticed her tense expression. Everything okay? He asked. Lyra shook her head. It's nothing. Just someone watching. Mark frowned. Watching? Who? Lyra avoided his gaze. I don't know. I just know they're there. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. In a city full of surveillance, drones, and corporate eyes everywhere, being observed was serious. He realized then that Lyra's life was more complicated than he had imagined. She wasn't just a wandering girl, she had secrets, skills, and perhaps enemies. Despite this, Mark made a decision. He would protect her, no questions asked. He had little to give, but he could give safety, warmth, and trust. That night, he sat by the window, thinking about the strange twist his life had taken. A girl, alone in the city, had walked into his life and changed it in ways he didn't yet understand. Eli, unaware of the tension, slept peacefully in his bed. Lyra lay on the floor beside him, hugging a pillow, her small figure still and quiet. Mark watched them and felt a profound sense of responsibility. He had never wanted to be a hero, but circumstances had made him one, and he was determined not to fail. The next morning, Lyra surprised Mark again. She had prepared breakfast for them, eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, arranged neatly on the table. Eli's eyes widened. "Wow, you made this?" he exclaimed. Lyra nodded, a small, proud smile appearing. "I wanted to." Mark felt a warmth in his chest. The girl who had arrived shivering in the rain was now helping them in small ways that mattered. She was becoming part of their lives, part of their little family. Later, Mark took the day off to spend time with both children. They visited a small market and walked through crowded streets. Lyra observed everything carefully, noticing details that others ignored: the speed of delivery drones, the patterns of traffic lights, and even the way vendors moved their goods. She whispered small observations to Mark, who marveled at her intelligence. "You notice things most adults miss," he said. Lyra shrugged. "It helps. You can't trust everything you see." Mark smiled. "I guess that's true." As evening fell, they returned home, tired but happy. Eli fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's adventures. Lyra sat at the table, quietly repairing another small device she had found, abandoned in the alley days ago. Mark watched her work, feeling awe and a growing bond of trust. It was in that quiet moment that Mark realized something important. Human kindness, resourcefulness, and determination could thrive even in the hardest circumstances. He had given Lyra shelter, warmth, and safety. In return, she gave them her trust, intelligence, and companionship. Outside, the city lights glimmered like stars fallen to the ground. The drones hummed softly above. The cars moved steadily through the streets, and the city continued its endless motion. But inside their small apartment, a small family had begun to form. Mark knew one thing for sure: Lyra's presence in their lives was no accident. She had a story, a past, and secrets that would soon come to light. And when those secrets were revealed, their lives would change in ways none of them could imagine. But for now, Mark focused on the simple things: warmth, trust, and the small victories of human ingenuity. He felt proud of Eli and amazed by Lyra. And he silently promised himself that, no matter what came next, he would protect them both with everything he had. In a city full of noise, rain, and uncertainty, Mark realized a simple truth: human connection, courage, and kindness were stronger than fear, loneliness, and hardship. And in that moment, he felt hope not just for his son, but for Lyra as well. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a rare gift in a city that often seemed gray and endless. Mark was already awake, preparing breakfast for Eli and Lyra. The apartment felt alive with quiet activity: Eli humming a tune while tying his shoes, and Lyra carefully arranging plates and cups on the table. Mark had noticed something different about her recently. She was still quiet about her past, still cautious, but there was a certain light in her eyes, a mix of intelligence, curiosity, and now a hint of hope. She was beginning to trust them. As they sat down to eat, a deep rumble echoed outside, making the building tremble slightly. Mark frowned and looked out the window. In the street below, a sleek, black limousine glided to a stop. Its polished surface reflected the morning sun like liquid metal. Two men in sharp suits stepped out and began scanning the surrounding area with professional precision. Mark's stomach tightened. Something about the scene seemed unusual. The men didn't look like police, delivery personnel, or city officials. They moved with the exact precision of people trained for a mission. Before he could think further, the limousine doors opened, and a tall, elegant man stepped out. He wore a tailored suit, his posture perfect, and his expression unreadable. Mark felt a strange shiver run down his spine. Something about this man commanded attention, even from the street below. Lyra, who had been quietly observing from the balcony, stiffened. Her eyes narrowed, and she whispered under her breath, "They found me." Mark's heart skipped a beat. "Found you? Who?" Before she could answer, the elevator dinged. A uniformed concierge appeared at their door, holding a tablet. "Mr. Reynolds?" he asked politely. "This gentleman requests to see the girl staying with you. He says it is urgent." Mark's mind raced. Urgent? Who would come for a child like Lyra? He looked at her, noticing the tension in her small frame. "Lyra. You know him?" Lyra shook her head slightly. I think so. Maybe. Just don't let them upset me." Mark nodded slowly, stepping toward the door. He opened it carefully. Standing there was the tall man from outside. His presence was imposing, yet he didn't carry the usual arrogance of someone used to power. Instead, there was a quiet confidence, almost a warmth, in his gaze. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," the man said politely. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I am here on urgent personal business." Mark's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "My name is Orion Vera. I am Lyra's father." Mark froze. His mind refused to grasp the words. "You're—" Lyra stepped back, her small hands gripping her blanket. Her eyes widened, a mix of fear and relief. "Father," she whispered. Mark felt his head spin. He had taken in a wandering girl, given her shelter, warmth, and safety, never knowing that she came from immense wealth. Orion's presence was calm, yet powerful, a stark contrast to the humble, struggling life Mark led. "I've been searching for her for months," Orion continued, his voice steady. "She left my home because she wanted freedom away from wealth, expectations, and control. I tracked her here because I wanted to ensure she was safe. And now, I see that she is. Thanks to you." Mark's mind raced. Wealth? Control? Freedom? None of this made sense. He had never imagined that the girl who repaired his broken devices, taught Eli clever tricks, and quietly observed the world was the daughter of one of the city's wealthiest men. I don't know what to say," Mark stammered. Orion shook his head. "There is nothing to say except thank you. You gave her something money cannot buy: trust, kindness, and a home. That is why I am here. Not to take her back forcibly, but to speak to you. And to her." Lyra looked up at Mark, her eyes full of conflict. "Daddy, I don't want to go," she said softly. Mark's heart ached. He had grown attached to her in just a few days. Eli had too. The small apartment had started to feel like a family home, and now the truth threatened to pull them apart. Orion noticed her hesitation and knelt to meet her eyes. "Lyra," he said gently, "I never wanted to control you. I only wanted to protect you. I understand now why you needed to come here. But I also need you to know. Your choices matter to me." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from the struggle of loyalty and trust. She turned to Mark, her voice trembling. "I like it here. I like you and Eli. I feel safe." Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, you're safe. And it's okay to want to stay. But maybe there's a way to have both worlds, your family and a home with us." Orion nodded slowly. "I do not wish to take her from you. I only wish to ensure she has every choice and every opportunity. I am prepared to offer anything she needs, But she must choose. Freely. For a long moment, silence filled the apartment. Then Lyra spoke, her voice small but firm. I want to stay. For now. But I want to know. About my other life. I want to understand my father too. Orion smiled, relief and pride in his eyes. Then that is what we shall do. I will stay nearby, and we will work together. I want to support both her and you, Mark. Not to replace, but to help. Mark blinked, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over him. Support, like financially? He asked cautiously. Orion shook his head. Not just money. Guidance, opportunities, and freedom. I will not force her into my world. But she will have the option to learn, to grow, and to explore. Mark exhaled slowly. He had feared losing Lyra. But now he realized that this revelation could strengthen their small family. Not break it. Lyra would have the freedom she desired, and Eli would not be alone in her absence. As the day progressed, the trio sat together in the apartment, sharing stories. Orion spoke gently, explaining some aspects of Lyra's early life, her education, her skills, and why she had grown up so quickly. Lyra listened quietly, absorbing the information without fear or resentment. You've always been clever, Orion said, smiling at her. But you've also been brave and independent. I am proud of who you are, not what you can do. Mark watched them, amazed at the interaction. Here was Lyra, balancing two worlds, one humble, one wealthy yet remaining herself. It was a testament to human strength, courage, and integrity. Eli, sensing the tension lift, ran up and hugged Lyra. I'm glad you're still here, he said. I don't want you to leave. Lyra hugged him back, smiling softly. I'm not leaving. Not yet. Mark felt a warmth spread through his chest. The moment was perfect in its simplicity. Trust, understanding, and the forming of bonds that transcended wealth and circumstance. That evening, after Orion left with the promise to remain close, Mark, Eli, and Lyra sat together on the small balcony, watching the city lights shimmer like stars fall into earth. I still can't believe he's your father, Mark said softly. Lyra shrugged. I didn't know either. Not really. I just wanted a place where I belonged. Mark smiled. Well, you have that here. And we'll figure out the rest together. She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The city below was vast and full of opportunity. Yet she felt grounded in their small apartment, a home built not on wealth, but on trust, courage, and human connection. Mark realized that this moment, fragile and fleeting, was a victory of human spirit. Despite the complexities of life, despite the challenges and secrets, they had found a way to belong, to care for each other, and to protect one another. And as night fell, the city hummed gently, drones hovering softly above, cars moving steadily through quiet streets, and lights flickering in distant windows. In their small apartment, Mark, Eli, and Lyra, three souls brought together by chance, had begun to truly feel like a family. Mark made a silent vow to himself. No matter what secrets the future held, no matter what wealth or power came knocking at their door, he would protect the bonds they had formed. Lyra's past was complicated, but the present belonged to them. And the future, well, it was theirs to shape, together. The morning sun streamed through the small apartment window, casting warm light over Mark's tiny kitchen. Eli was already awake, bouncing on his bed with the energy only a child could possess. Lyra, as usual, was calm and precise, sitting cross-legged on the floor and sketching something in a small notebook. Mark sipped his coffee and glanced at her. "What are you working on?" he asked. Lyra looked up, her eyes thoughtful. "Ideas. Ways to improve things around the apartment. And maybe even the neighborhood." Mark chuckled softly. "That sounds ambitious for someone your age." Lyra shrugged. "I like thinking about solutions." Mark smiled, feeling a mix of pride and curiosity. Since her father had revealed himself, Lyra had been more at ease, yet, despite the knowledge of wealth and resources, she seemed determined to live simply with them, proving that human ingenuity, not money, mattered most. That morning, Mark had a plan. He wanted to see how far their small family could go, using only what they had, relying on skill, creativity, and determination, rather than outside help. The idea came after his brief conversation with Orion. His pride told him that he didn't want to be dependent on money, even if it was freely offered. "Eli," Mark said, kneeling by his son's bed. "Today we're going to do something different. We're going to improve this apartment, using our own ideas, not money." Eli's eyes widened. "Like inventions?" "Exactly," Mark said. "We'll use things we already have. We'll make this place better, stronger, and more fun. And Lyra will help too." Lyra's eyes lit up. "I have ideas already," she said quietly. By mid-morning, the small apartment was transformed into a workshop. Old appliances, broken toys, and bits of scrap metal were gathered into a corner. Mark showed Eli how to safely handle simple tools, while Lyra carefully examined each item, pointing out possibilities that Mark hadn't considered. "See this old fan," Lyra said, holding it up. "We can make it stronger with these parts from the broken robot." Mark nodded. "Good thinking. Let's try it." For hours, they worked together. Mark used his practical knowledge of mechanics. Lyra applied her sharp mind to improving designs, and Eli contributed his boundless energy, testing things repeatedly and offering ideas in his childlike way. By lunchtime, their small apartment had transformed. The old fan now ran faster and more quietly. They had built a small solar-powered lamp using discarded batteries and a tiny solar panel they had salvaged. Lyra had even fixed an old toy robot, turning it into a helper for carrying small items. Mark looked around in amazement. "I can't believe what we did." "With almost nothing," Lyra smiled faintly. "You just needed to think differently." It was more than just cleverness. Mark realized that human ingenuity, combined with courage, persistence, and cooperation, could accomplish incredible things, even in the harshest circumstances. Lyra's skills weren't just talent, they were the product of necessity, experience, and a mind trained to solve problems creatively. Later that afternoon, Mark decided to take the family on a short exploration of the neighborhood. He wanted to show Lyra that even in the larger city, clever thinking could help people live better, even without money. They walked through narrow alleys, streets crowded with vendors, and small parks. Lyra's eyes scanned everything, noticing details most adults ignored. She pointed out weak streetlights that could be fixed with small solar panels, water taps that leaked and could be repaired with minimal effort, and even old benches that could be repurposed as storage spaces. Mark was impressed. "You really see the world differently," he said. Lyra shrugged. "You have to. If you don't notice problems, you can't fix them." At the local park, Eli ran ahead to play, and Mark followed with Lyra. Together, they repaired a broken swing with spare chains from an old gate nearby. Children gathered around, curious and excited to see the swing working again. Some even helped, offering small pieces of scrap. "It's amazing," Mark said quietly. "You can do all of this, and it helps everyone." Lyra nodded. "It's not just for us. It's for everyone. You just have to think and try." As evening approached, they returned home, exhausted but proud. Mark had never felt so fulfilled. This small apartment, once just a place to survive, now felt like a hub of creativity and human potential. He realized that even in a world full of technology, drones, and corporate wealth, simple human skill and determination could create real change. That night, after dinner, Mark sat with Lyra while Eli slept. He noticed her quiet contemplation. "You've changed a lot in just a few days," he said. Lyra looked up. "I feel stronger. I know I can do more now. Not just survive, but help." Mark nodded. "You've always been strong. You just didn't know it." Lyra smiled faintly. "I like it here. I feel safe And I feel like I belong. Mark felt a lump in his throat. Her words reminded him why he had taken her in, because even in a harsh world, kindness and trust could create a home. It wasn't money that mattered, but love, courage, and human ingenuity. The next day brought a new challenge. Orion had called to check in on Lyra, and while he offered no financial help yet, he expressed a desire to see how Mark and Eli were adapting. Mark decided to take this as an opportunity. He wanted to show that human resourcefulness could thrive without relying on wealth. With Lyra's help, they started a small project turning an unused rooftop into a functional space. They gathered scrap wood, old metal sheets, and broken furniture. Lyra calculated the weight distribution and stability, while Mark and Eli carried and assembled materials. By evening, they had created a small garden and seating area, complete with a solar lamp made from their earlier experiment. "Look at that!" Eli exclaimed, climbing onto a bench. "We did this ourselves." Mark looked at Lyra, pride evident in his eyes. "See? This is what humans can do when we work together. We don't need money to make a difference." Lyra's face lit up. "It feels amazing. We made something that lasts, with our hands and brains." That night, they sat on the rooftop, watching the city lights sparkle like stars. The hum of drones and the distant chatter of the streets created a soothing background. Mark realized something profound. Even in a technologically advanced world, it was human ingenuity, not wealth or machines, that could shape a meaningful life. Orion visited briefly that evening, observing their work. He was clearly impressed. "I can see why Lyra chose to stay," he said quietly. "You've created a place where human effort and love matter more than money." Mark smiled. "That's all we have. But it's enough." Orion nodded. "I will respect her choice. And I will support you. Not with money, but with knowledge and opportunities, if you ever need them." Lyra, sitting beside Mark, whispered softly, "I'm glad I stayed." "Lyra, I'm glad I stayed." Mark put a hand on her shoulder. "We're glad you did too." As night deepened, Mark realized that the lessons of the past few days were simple yet powerful. Courage, creativity, and human connection could overcome challenges, even in a city that often seemed indifferent and harsh. Money and power were tools, but they could never replace ingenuity, kindness, and trust. And as they sat together, the small family Mark, Eli, and Lyra felt a quiet triumph. They had turned adversity into opportunity, proving that even ordinary humans could achieve extraordinary things. In a world full of technology and wealth, it was human spirit that shone brightest. Mark knew the journey wasn't over. Lyra's past would eventually bring challenges, and life would continue to test their ingenuity and courage. But for now, they had created something priceless, a home built on trust, creativity, and love. And in the glow of their small rooftop garden, with the city sparkling below, Mark felt a quiet sense of victory. Human ingenuity had triumphed, and their little family was stronger for it. The morning air was crisp and fresh as sunlight spilled across the city. Mark stood on the rooftop, sipping his coffee while Eli darted around, pretending to be a superhero. Lyra sat quietly beside him, her notebook open, sketching ideas for new improvements around the apartment. The small rooftop garden they had built glowed softly under the early sun, a reminder of their teamwork and determination. Mark watched her, feeling proud. Lyra had grown stronger, more confident, and more at ease. She was no longer the trembling, uncertain girl who had arrived in the rain days ago. She was clever, capable, and full of curiosity. Most importantly, she had learned that human ingenuity, kindness, and courage could create a real home even without money. The peaceful morning was interrupted by the distant hum of a limousine approaching. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He knew who it was. Orion Vera had returned. Orion stepped out of the car with his usual calm confidence. Unlike before, this time he wore a soft smile. There was no tension, only a quiet admiration in his eyes as he looked at the rooftop, at the garden, and at the small family gathered there. "Good morning, everyone," he said politely. "I wanted to see how things are progressing, and to speak with all of you about the future." Lyra's face brightened at the sight of her father. But she didn't move. Instead, she glanced at Mark, silently asking him to stay calm. Mark stepped forward. "Good morning, Mr. Vera. Everything's been going well." "We've been busy," Orion nodded. "I can see that. And I'm impressed. You've shown her that human creativity and effort can overcome almost any challenge. That is something money cannot teach." Mark felt a warm sense of pride. For days, he had worked tirelessly to prove that they could thrive without relying on wealth. Now, Orion himself acknowledged their achievements. Lyra finally spoke. "Father, I've learned a lot here. I've learned that I can do more than I thought. I like being here." With Mark and Eli, Orion knelt to meet her gaze. "I understand. And I want you to know, you are free to choose your path. I will not force you to leave this home, but I am here to support you in any way you wish." Mark felt a quiet relief. This was exactly what he had hoped for. A balance between Lyra's past and her present, her family and her freedom. Orion continued, addressing both Mark and Eli. "I also want to offer a partnership. Not money as charity, but collaboration. Mark, I admire your ingenuity and perseverance. If you wish, I would like to support your projects, your inventions, and Eli's education. You will have opportunities, guidance, and access to resources, but only if you want them." Mark's mind raced. This was more than he had expected. Yet, his pride remained. "I appreciate that, Mr. Vera, but I want to do this using our own efforts first. Only then, maybe we can work together." Orion nodded in understanding. "I respect that, completely. That is why I came to show you that you have choices, not obligations. Lyra has learned the value of effort and ingenuity here. I do not wish to take that away." Eli jumped up, his excitement bubbling over. "So, Lyra can stay, and we can all be a team?" Lyra nodded, smiling softly. "Yes, we can." Orion's eyes sparkled with pride. "Then that is what we shall do. I will remain nearby, offering guidance and support if needed. And I will let her continue to grow here, learning the ways of both worlds." Mark felt a sense of victory. Their small family formed not by wealth, but by trust, courage, and determination was being recognized and respected by the world beyond their apartment. Over the next few days, Orion worked quietly to integrate himself without disturbing their routines. He offered Lyra access to books, advanced tools, and learning opportunities. But only when she asked. He never forced her, never pressured her, and always spoke with respect and patience. Meanwhile, Mark and Lyra continued their small projects, using ingenuity and creativity to improve their living space and help neighbors. Together, they built new devices from recycled materials, repaired old machines, and taught Eli about problem-solving in fun and practical ways. One afternoon, Mark and Lyra stood on the rooftop, looking down at the streets below. Children played near a fountain, vendors prepared for the evening rush, and the city hummed with life. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Mark asked. Curious. Lyra shook her head. "Not really. I've learned a lot here. I like it. I feel safe. And I like seeing what we can do with just our minds and hands." Mark smiled. "That's good. You've grown so much already. I'm proud of you." Lyra blushed slightly but looked away, focusing on a small robotic device she had repaired. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. Mark felt his chest tighten. In that moment, he realized something simple yet profound. Human connections, effort, and trust were far more powerful than wealth or control. Lyra had learned to trust and to thrive, and he had learned that even in hardship, humans could rise above challenges with courage and ingenuity. The days passed, and their bond grew stronger. Eli continued to play, learn, and grow under the guidance of Mark and Lyra. The apartment became a hub of creativity, a place where ideas flourished and small inventions came to life. One evening, Orion visited again. Observing the rooftop garden and the small devices Lyra and Mark had created, he was impressed. "I can see why she chose to stay here," he said softly. "This is a place where human effort and ingenuity matter more than wealth. It is rare and remarkable." Mark nodded. "That's all we have, but it's enough." Lyra stood beside them, her face glowing with quiet satisfaction. "We've made something real," she said. "Not because of money, but because of effort, teamwork, and trust." Orion smiled. "And that is the greatest lesson anyone can learn. You have all earned it." That night, the three, Mark, Eli, and Lyra, sat together on the rooftop, gazing at the city lights. The hum of drones, the faint sounds of traffic, and the glow of neon created a soft backdrop. For the first time, Mark felt that their family was complete. He realized that wealth, power, and status could not replace human ingenuity, determination, and kindness. Lyra's father had resources, but it was Mark's heart, courage, and practical skill that had given her a home, safety, and freedom. Lyra rested her head on Eli's shoulder, smiling softly. "I'm glad I stayed," she whispered. Mark put his arm around her, feeling a quiet sense of victory. "We're glad you did too," he said. Orion watched from a respectful distance, knowing that Lyra's choice was wise. He had wealth, power, and resources, but he also understood the greatest gift he could give his daughter: freedom, respect, and the chance to grow with people who loved her. As night deepened, the city lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth. The rooftop garden, small devices, and simple creations glowed softly under the moonlight. Mark realized that this was more than just a home. It was a symbol of human resilience, creativity, and connection. Even in a world of technology, drones, and wealth, the most important thing was not money or power. It was courage, ingenuity, and the ability to care for one another. And in that quiet, beautiful moment, Mark understood something truly remarkable. Their small family, formed through trust, love, and human spirit, was stronger than anything money could buy. Lyra looked up at the stars, feeling hope, pride, and freedom. Eli bounced happily beside her, and Mark, he felt something he hadn't in years. A sense of accomplishment, love, and belonging. The future was uncertain. Challenges would come. Lyra's past and wealth might bring new tests. But they were ready together. Human ingenuity, courage, and kindness had carried them this far, and Mark knew it would continue to guide them, no matter what lay ahead. In the end, it was clear. Human connection, resilience, and creativity outshone wealth, power, and fear. And as the city slept beneath them, the small family on the rooftop knew they had found something priceless: home, hope, and the power of being human.